New details emerge on the suspect in the White House Correspondents' dinner shooting. Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire continues to fracture. Airstrikes in Lebanon leave 14 dead. HORMUZ bottleneck drives sharp power price surge in southern China. Russia-China-North Korea axis. Accused. The war in Ukraine may be being sustained by forced labor. The investigation into the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner is rapidly shifting from what first appeared to be a standalone security incident into a politically charged domestic extremism case. According to U.S. officials, suspect Cole Allen reportedly left behind a manifesto explicitly naming members of Donald Trump's administration as targets. That suggests this may not have been a spontaneous act, but a premeditated operation. Federal prosecutor Jeanine Pirro in Washington, D.C., said the suspect has initially been charged with 2 serious federal offenses: using a firearm during a violent crime and assaulting a federal law enforcement officer with a dangerous weapon. Officials also stressed that this may only be the opening phase of the case, with additional and more severe charges still under review. That reflects how Washington typically handles attacks aimed at senior leadership. Move quickly with immediate charges to stabilize the situation, then expand the case once evidence is fully assembled. When the suspected targets include a president, vice president, or cabinet officials, the investigation often rises to a national security level. According to preliminary findings, although Donald Trump, Melania Trump, and J.D. Vance were moved to safety, one federal agent was shot while subduing the suspect. The agent survived because of body armor. That is a critical detail. Security protocols worked exactly when needed, preventing the incident from escalating into a national crisis. Investigators say Allen was carrying a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives. In other words, this was not someone arriving with a single weapon to cause disruption. He arrived carrying multiple weapons configured for a sustained attack, often viewed as a sign of intent to inflict maximum casualties if security barriers were breached. According to social media records, the 31-year-old suspect from Torrance reportedly studied mechanical engineering at California Institute of Technology and later earned a computer science degree from California State University Dominguez Hills. He was also described as an independent game developer who designed shooting-themed games. That highlights a recurring reality in modern extremism cases. Perpetrators do not always emerge from traditional criminal backgrounds. Many possess education, technical skills, and the ability to plan independently. That makes early detection far more difficult. Officials say Allen traveled from Los Angeles to Chicago before taking a train to Washington, D.C. That multi-leg route suggests this was not an impulsive decision. Operationally, the suspect appears to have invested time in reaching the target while minimizing attention. Political motives are also under deeper review. A family member reportedly told investigators that Allen had made repeated extremist statements and spoke about needing to do something to fix the world. Family members also said he had attended anti-Trump protests in California and had ties to a group known as the Wide Awakes. Campaign finance records additionally show the suspect donated $25 through ActBlue in support of Kamala Harris. However, from an investigative standpoint, a small donation does not automatically prove an organized political conspiracy. It is simply background data used to build an ideological profile. U.S. authorities currently appear more focused on the theory of a politically motivated lone wolf rather than a broader coordinated network. If that assessment is correct, the biggest challenge becomes how to identify self-radicalized individuals before they act. Politically, the attack will likely be used by Donald Trump to reinforce a law and order message, tighten federal security measures, and criticize the increasingly radical climate of American politics. When a suspect targets national leaders in the heart of the Capitol, the consequences extend far beyond an ordinary criminal case. The shooting at the Washington Hilton was not just a security breach. It reflects how deeply polarization has penetrated American society, where political resentment increasingly risks turning into direct violence. White House Correspondents Association issues statement after shooting. Following the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner at the Washington Hilton, WHCA President Weijia Jiang said the ballroom fell into panic during the incident. She also thanked the United States Secret Service and law enforcement personnel for keeping thousands of guests safe. The WHCA confirmed that all attendees were unharmed, including Donald Trump, Melania Trump, and J.D. Vance. The association also praised reporters at the scene for remaining calm and quickly returning to their duties after the attack. WHCA leadership said an emergency meeting will be held soon to review the incident and determine next steps. After the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., numerous world leaders strongly condemned political violence and expressed relief that Donald Trump and other senior U.S. officials were safe. Ursula von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Benjamin Netanyahu, and other leaders emphasized that violence has no place in democracy. The international reaction suggests that security instability targeting American leadership is no longer viewed as a purely domestic matter. It is increasingly seen as an issue tied directly to Western political stability and the broader international order. Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire continues to fracture. Airstrikes in Lebanon leave 14 dead. While the U.S. brokered ceasefire was expected to calm Israel's northern front, developments on the ground are telling a different story. On April 26th, Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon killed 14 people and wounded 37, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. The dead reportedly included 2 children and 2 women. The latest escalation suggests the ceasefire has so far reduced the intensity of fighting, but has not been strong enough to break the cycle of retaliation between the two sides. The strikes may be less frequent, but the fighting has not ended. At the same time, the Israel Defense Forces issued warnings ordering civilians to evacuate 7 towns in southern Lebanon located outside the buffer zone currently controlled by Israel. That is an important signal. Washington may be pushing diplomacy, but on the ground, Israel is still preserving freedom to strike militarily whenever it perceives a threat from Hezbollah. Tel Aviv says Hezbollah violated the ceasefire and stated that Israeli forces struck militants, rocket launchers, and weapons depots linked to the group. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's top priority remains the security of the country, its troops, and border communities. Hezbollah, meanwhile, says it will continue attacks as long as Israeli forces remain inside Lebanon and continue violating the agreement. The group also described diplomatic efforts so far as ineffective. What is emerging is a ceasefire that still allows combat. Officially, an agreement still exists, but both sides reserve the right to use force whenever they deem necessary. That creates a fragile form of stability in which any single incident could pull the region back into full-scale conflict. Battlefield events already reflect that reality. Hezbollah says it attacked Israeli troops inside Lebanese territory, while Israel confirmed 1 soldier was killed and 6 wounded. On the same day, the Israeli military also said it intercepted 3 drones before they entered Israeli airspace. Since March 2nd, more than 2,500 people have reportedly been killed in Israeli attacks in Lebanon. According to Lebanon's health ministry, the toll includes 277 women, 177 children, and 100 medical workers. Israel says attacks from Hezbollah have killed 2 civilians and 16 Israeli soldiers. At a deeper level, the Israel-Hezbollah front has now become an extension of the broader regional crisis following the U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran. That means the Lebanon border is no longer an isolated flashpoint, but one link in a wider chain of confrontation stretching from Tehran to the Mediterranean. However, the impact of this crisis does not stop at bombs and battlefields. The geopolitical shockwaves are now spreading into energy markets and global supply chains. Hormuz bottleneck drives sharp power price surge in southern China. Disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz are creating ripple effects far beyond the Middle East. One of the clearest consequences has been a sharp rise in electricity prices across Guangdong and several parts of southern China in recent weeks. The main driver is disruptions along one of the world's most critical energy transit routes, which has raised imported fuel costs. Southern China depends heavily on outside supplies of coal and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, making its power system especially vulnerable to geopolitical disruptions. During April, electricity prices in Guangdong repeatedly moved close to 1 yuan per kilowatt hour, significantly higher than the same period last year. According to data from the Guangzhou Power Exchange Center, average spot prices across southern China reached 468 yuan per megawatt hour from April 1st to April 23rd, up 38% from March. Guangdong posted the highest average at 533 yuan per megawatt hour, while provinces including Guangxi, Yunnan, Guizhou, and Hainan also moved higher. The sharpest volatility began in late March, when real-time electricity prices in Guangdong surged from roughly 865 dong equivalent per kilowatt hour to nearly 3,420. On some days in early April, prices briefly approached 3,430. By comparison, during the same period in 2025, prices were only around 1,050 to 1,230. That indicates cost pressure has accelerated rapidly. The core cause lies in global energy markets. When the Strait of Hormuz, a vital corridor for oil and LNG shipments, falls into instability, cargoes are delayed or rerouted. As a result, LNG import prices into China reportedly rose more than 9% in the first half of April alone. Guangdong is especially exposed to that shock. As China's largest industrial and export hub, the province has massive electricity demand and relies heavily on seaborne fuel imports. When gas and coal prices rise, marginal cost pricing mechanisms can quickly push wholesale power prices higher. More broadly, this is a clear reminder that the Strait of Hormuz does not only affect global oil prices, it also directly impacts China's manufacturing chain, from factories and logistics networks to export competitiveness. Russia-China-North Korea axis. Accused. The Ukraine war may be sustained by forced labor networks. While the world focuses on missiles and battlefronts in Ukraine, another war infrastructure is emerging: manpower and funding sustained through cross-border forced labor networks. New reports allege North Korea, Russia, and China are linked in a system that supports both war efforts and authoritarian rule. According to a report by the North Korean Human Rights Citizens Alliance in Seoul, Pyongyang has allegedly sent citizens to Russia under the cover of student visas or legal labor contracts. Many were reportedly forced into construction and state-linked projects. Some are also said to have been drawn into support functions connected to the Ukraine war. If accurate, this is no longer a routine migrant labor issue. It reflects a system where people are treated as strategic assets, generating foreign currency for the regime while filling wartime labor shortages abroad. More importantly, that matters greatly to Vladimir Putin. In a prolonged war, the greatest costs are not only ammunition, but manpower, logistics, and economic endurance. If Russia gains access to cheap or coerced labor abroad, pressure at home can ease. The report also notes that North Korean workers in Russia have long faced allegations of harsh conditions, tight surveillance, confiscated wages, and near total restrictions on movement. In reality, this resembles a state-managed labor export system in which revenue flows back to the regime, not the workers. Notably, this issue is not new. International reporting for years has documented North Korean labor in Russian construction, forestry, and industrial sectors. The Ukraine war, however, may have sharply increased the strategic value of that network. Another layer of the picture lies in manufacturing supply chains. Previous reports from the same organization argued that some exported goods labeled as made in China or routed through regional intermediaries could be tied to forced labor inside North Korean detention facilities. If true, it would mean parts of the global trading system may be unintentionally absorbing products created through exploitation. More broadly, China has long faced international criticism over forced labor allegations, particularly involving Xinjiang. When Beijing's supply chains overlap with Pyongyang's opaque labor networks, the line between civilian trade and state-controlled exploitation becomes blurred. This is a model in which production, labor, and war are tightly fused together. Another report also raised concerns about trafficking from South Asia to meet manpower needs linked to Russia's war effort. If that trend expands, modern war may rely not only on domestic mobilization, but on labor drawn from vulnerable regions through fraud, coercion, and shadow networks. That is why many analysts argue that human rights and international security cannot be separated. When a regime is willing to exploit its own citizens, it is often willing to violate other international norms as well. Collectively, the world may be witnessing a new form of support axis among authoritarian states. Russia needs manpower, materials, and sanctions resilience. North Korea needs cash and political cover. China provides economic space, technology, and diplomatic breathing room. If such a model operates effectively, it could prolong the conflict and weaken the impact of traditional sanctions. From trenches in Ukraine to construction sites in Russia, from Asian factories to closed labor camps, modern war may be sustained not only by tanks and artillery, but by a transnational forced labor marketplace. And that may be one of the most dangerous fronts of all. Quieter, less visible, but far more durable. From Washington, D.C. to the Strait of Hormuz, from Lebanon to Ukraine, the world is heating up across multiple fronts at the same time. In your view, is America strengthening its position at the top, or is this only the calm before a much larger storm? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for the latest updates on the global geopolitical chessboard.